Over the last year or so, I have started to think for the first time in my life that nuclear power might actually be a thing that's going to come back. Like, there's been so much conversation about this, arguing and advocacy on both sides, but now a bunch of forces are conspiring together to maybe have this actually be the time. And maybe it isn't just going to be, maybe it already is. We're just not looking in the right places. This is a story of China, of artificial intelligence, of carbon dioxide's inability to be transparent to infrared light. And first and foremost, it is a story of this duck. This duck, this duck, this one, and this one. This is the duck curve, and it's important. This is California's duck curve. It's a mess. This duck curve is what happens if you look at how people consume power and like what kind of power is needed as you go through the day. People do the stuff that they do, like at 2 a.m. they're not consuming very much power, but power is being consumed by various things. But then as power like shoots up, then in the middle of the day, that's also when there's solar power, and that's amazing. But then in the night between 6 and 9 p.m., people are at home using a lot of electricity, and there isn't very much solar power, and that is a problem. Now, a lot of the duck can get shaved off, and in fact, probably all of the head of this duck, we want to cut the head of the duck, and probably all of the head of the duck can be cut off by batteries and other power storage methods. But not all of us live in California. I live in a place where you don't just need to cut the head off the duck. There's also a seasonal duck curve. I can actually open it up for you right now. I can look at my solar panels generation, and I can show you a problem that killing a duck cannot solve. This is my solar power generation for last year. You can see that my production in the 7th month of the year, whichever one that is, I think July, is 1.28 megawatt hours. And then in the least month, which is January, it's Montana. The sun barely comes up, and when it does, it's cloudy. That was 277 kilowatt hours. So there's a big shift there. That's like a 4x difference. And so I'd have to have 4 times the amount of solar panels as I have to produce the amount in January as I produce in July. Worse than that, all of the months nearby January, all the way up to the 4th one, which is April, and the 11th one, which is, God, I'm so bad at months. November. If they'd just have done it by the numbers, that would have made things much easier for me. October. Oct for 8 being the 10th month. F you, Rome! But that's not the point. The point is that in order to give people power when they need it, which is all of the time, you have to be able to produce power when people need it, which is all of the time. And there are people who argue that a lot of this problem, or all of this problem, is going to get solved by power storage. We're going to be able to produce so much renewable power through wind and solar. We're going to store that in all kinds of weird ways, batteries and thermal storage and gravity storage. I just don't think that we'll be able to store as much power as we need, and that it will be good to have baseload power. And there are just two options for future baseload power. Baseload power is power that is produced all of the time. And also there's like some baseload power that you can turn on and off when you need it. We're going to need some, what they call clean, firm power. Clean, firm. I love that. It's clean because it's not fossil fuels. It's not emitting carbon dioxide. It's firm because you can get it whenever you need it. You don't have to like hope, and you don't have to like charge a battery and then be like, oh no, if we run out, we run out. What happens in the 5th month of winter? I feel like people aren't from Montana. Is it just me? Like, there are Canadians. They're real. So we need clean firm. And there are, by my count, basically 2 kinds of clean firm power that I could rely on in the future, like that we will be able to turn on when we need it, whenever we need it. Because I don't really think that capturing the carbon dioxide coming out of natural gas plants is the way forward. I don't think it is. I could be wrong. They keep saying it's going to be a thing, and then it never is. It's very hard to do. It's hard to pull off. One is geothermal power, which is in its infancy in most places. In places where it's like extraordinarily suitable to it, there's lots of very near to the surface heat, like Iceland, that's great. But we're not going to convert Yellowstone National Park into well, actually, this is interesting. We're not going to convert it into a giant geothermal power plant, though NASA does have a plan to, if we need to, siphon the heat away from Yellowstone National Park and capture geothermal energy that could produce like as much power as the entire US needs. But we would have to build a bunch of geothermal power plants inside of Yellowstone National Park, which I don't think would go over very well unless we were pretty sure we were about to all die. And we're not. We think that the supervolcano still has quite a ways to go before it pops off. But there are a bunch of new kinds of geothermal that are more exciting that I'll talk. There's lots of YouTube videos about them. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about nuclear power and whether or not it's going to make a comeback. And I have predictions about why it is.
But before we get to that, it is possible that you're thinking right now, boy, the grid sure is going to keep getting cleaner and cleaner, but my car isn't. So maybe I should start saving up to get myself an electric car. I encourage you to do that. And to help with that, there's today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. You can go and look at all of your subscriptions in one place. And at the top, it will tell you how much you're paying per month. And you can multiply that by 12 and ask yourself the hard question, do I want it to be that number? You can upload a photo of a bill, and with a few taps, it can help you negotiate a lower rate. You can lower your bills and set budgets so that you can achieve your financial goals. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the premium features, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. To save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/HankGreen or just click the link in the description to get started for free. You can also unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/HankGreen to get started for free. Now, back to the video.
First, if we type in China nuclear power plants, and we're going to say graph. Give me a graph of China nuclear power plants. Nuclear power generation in China, that is going up. Billion kilowatt hours, billions of kilowatt hours. That's a lot of them. We've also got China's electricity generation by fuel type. We've got coal, still a lot, and still growing as of 2021. But you've also got nuclear, which is an increasing little slice here. Not very big. Number of nuclear... this is a great graph. Nuclear reactors, 2023, China, total and under construction. The United States, under construction. China, that's a lot. Right now, under construction. Japan had a lot of nuclear power plants, shut nearly all of them down after Fukushima, but that is again growing. Whereas in that time, China has now exceeded what Japan ever was. And here's new starts of nuclear construction around the world. And you can see that it's all China. It's just all China. There are some other places, but pretty much every year since 2008, China has had more nuclear power plants begin construction than the entire rest of the world combined. And it's worth looking at the US, where we had a huge number of nuclear power plants going online up through 1990, and then none, pretty much none, though we have had one new one go online just now, the Vogtle Unit 3, which is a big deal. Like, we actually did get another one online. But I think that the United States government is a little bit looking at what China is up to right now. And maybe some people on one side of the aisle are thinking, boy, it would be good to create big mega projects that would employ people and also compete with China. I guess probably both sides of the aisle are pretty much feeling that vibe. And then one has the extra incentive of being like, oh my God, there's a crisis in the climate and we need to produce power, especially as demand for electricity goes up, which is going to happen for two reasons when we thought it was just one. We thought there was going to be an electrification of a lot of infrastructure, including vehicles, including heat, both in your home from heat pumps and industrial heat, which is going to require a lot of electricity if we electrify it, which we should. Industrial heat is just heating stuff up for industrial purposes, whether that's boiling off orange juice to make concentrate or doing all the stuff you need to make steel. But there's also another reason why we suddenly need to make more electricity, or want to, and we're going to talk about that soon. But first, we have to see what the US government has actually done to address this and maybe open up the possibility for more nuclear to be built in the US. Are there actually steps being taken? This is part of my case. And June 6th of 2024, Congress passes the Advance Act to facilitate US development of advanced nuclear reactors. This was passed by both houses of Congress and then signed by Joe Biden, and it is now a law. It is a change thing that is intended to boost nuclear reactor deployment in the US, both of existing technologies and potentially newer technologies. It's basically a regulatory reform thing. The big reason why we think the graph went like this is because we suddenly got new regulations on nuclear power, but also because people's opinions changed. Like, people wanted it less. Something relatively important happened around 1986 that maybe resulted in there being a little bit less support for nuclear reactors, and that was Chernobyl. And then, the ones that were in construction got completed, but then a lot of them didn't.
Now, this is kind of silly,
I think because Chernobyl's design was very different from every nuclear reactor we've ever built in America. We've never built one like that. We build them a different way that's safer. But there's also lots of ways to build nuclear power plants. It's very difficult to regulate. There was lots of energy to be like, let's do it in the safest way possible. And that meant let's do it in the most expensive way possible. Like that. There's always going to be something else you could do to make something safer. And so if you have to have it be as safe as possible, then it will not be cost competitive with things that are less safe, like coal power, which is less safe than nuclear. Kills way more people. Let's look at those numbers. What would you say is the most dangerous source of power? We've got our world and data here. It's coal by a long shot. So they kill people both from accidents and air pollution. Coal mining is extraordinarily difficult, but also air pollution kills a lot of people. And also they kill people through greenhouse gas emissions. You've also got oil, quite dangerous. Biomass, quite dangerous. Natural gas, not as dangerous from accidents and air pollution because it's actually a very clean burning fuel, but very dangerous from a climate science perspective. And then you got our little darlings here, wind, nuclear, solar. Very few deaths from accidents and pollution. And amazingly enough, nuclear has the lowest carbon impact of all of them because you have to build the solar power and the wind power. And that requires energy that is currently not produced renewably. Nuclear energy is very safe. Now, all of these are far safer than fossil fuels. But nuclear power, I'm sorry, it's super safe. From what we could tell, there is one thing I don't like about nuclear power, which is that it requires there to be more nuclear fuel in the world, and that can be used for various things if it falls into the wrong hands. Now, you can do everything you can to have it not fall into the wrong hands, but that's scary. I don't love that. I don't love having it in Russia, which is not the most safe place, it feels like. But the U.S. government, both houses of Congress, both sides of the aisle, and Joe Biden with his pen have decided that we want to do things to incentivize nuclear power. And that's actually happening. So the government's doing it in part in response to China, in part in response to the need for there to be more electricity. But there's a final force going on here, which I've alluded to several times. And it is that we thought electricity generation was going to go up for one reason, the electrification of infrastructure. But it is also going to go up for a new reason, which is that tech companies, some of the most powerful institutions in our culture, and also some of the most well-funded ones, are having a big fight over who's going to win the AI battle. And AI training specifically, but also just the use of it, requires a huge amount of electricity, and not in a way that you can manage. You can't say, I'm going to train my AI models when the solar panels are out, for a very important reason, which is that the expensive part of training an AI model isn't the electricity, it's the chips. You get these chips from NVIDIA that are good at training AI for reasons I don't understand, but I believe you because obviously you're spending many billions of dollars on them. They buy the chips and then they have to use the chips all of the time, because if they don't use them all of the time, they are not getting a good return on their investment. If you only use the chips during the time of the day when the solar power is happening, then you're only getting 40% of the value of your chips? No, you're not going to do that. You're a tech company that is now in a battle for its life to change everything from the ground up, whether or not it happens or not. They think that it will, and they're fighting for it, and they're telling their investors that this is the fight that they need to have. And all of these companies, previous to this sudden explosion in the need for new electricity use for the training and use of large language models and other generative AI, they all had these commitments to not just be 100% clean power, not just offset their emissions, but to have 24/7 all of the time to only be using clean power. And they made these commitments to, their employees and to the world, and now they're not going to be able to meet them. And that is why these companies are doing wild things. Like Microsoft is restarting the reactor at 3 Mile Island. And also why Amazon has just invested more than $500 million to develop small modular reactors. These are little nuclear reactors that are easier to kind of mass produce and then plonk down in a place, which people think could make it cheaper rather than having to make every plant bespoke for the specific area where you're going to put it. The way that they're doing this right now is just natural gas. They're oh my God, we have to do this. We have to do it fast. And they're all competing with each other. And Elon's X, they just brought a ton of local natural gas plants in super fast to generate electricity at the data center without even getting approval for it. They're fighting so hard for this. And I am actually a believer that artificial intelligence is going to be a very big economic deal. Like I don't think that this is like crypto. I don't think that it's like the other nonsense, like the metaverse. Like there's just been so much nonsense lately, but this feels really real to me. I don't think this is made up. I think there's real value here. I don't know how we're going to capture it. I don't know if like the way that we're doing right now is like going to be a giant bubble that will explode and destroy everything. But I think it's real. I think this product is real. I don't love the way that it's being done. Of course, I've made videos about that. But what Amazon's doing isn't just investing in a company to say, hey, maybe like my investment will pay off sometime in the future. They're actually saying, hey, we're going to buy these small nuclear reactors from you. You're going to make them. We're going to own them. We're going to operate them, and they're going to power our data centers. So that's wild. There's been so much time that people have spent saying that small modular reactors maybe will be a thing someday. And Amazon was just like, all right, they're going to be a thing. We're going to make them a thing because we need that clean, firm power. They need super firm power. And they also want it to be clean because they've made these commitments. I think Google has also done a nuclear thing. I don't know what it is. Google signed nuclear reactor deal so they're also, that was 1 day ago when I recorded this video, which is a while ago, because I've got a schedule, okay? Google also has a deal with Fervo, which is a geothermal power company that I mentioned earlier. I may have said Forvo. That's something else. What's Forvo? Did I make that up? I did. I just made that up. It's not a thing. I get that there are reasons to be skeptical of nuclear power. It's not great when bad stuff happens to them. It's happened 3 times. 3 Mile Island, Fukushima, and Chernobyl. Each time, pretty bad. Different levels of bad, but pretty bad. But there are a bunch of like lines pointing in a direction that nuclear is going to be a bigger part of our power mix in the future. And I don't mean fusion, I mean fission. And they are: 1, China is building a lot of nuclear reactors right now, and including one that's going to launch in 2025 that's an entirely new kind of nuclear reactor that uses molten salts instead of water to carry around heat, which is safer and potentially cheaper for a bunch of reasons. But like, you have to totally redesign how you design your power plant when you use molten salt. The US wants to be competitive with China and doesn't like that they're getting better at something while we aren't. And so our government is changing the way that we're regulating nuclear power. I also think that people now are just less worried about nuclear power than they used to be, and they are more worried about climate change than they ever have been. I think that that is a rational way to see things. I think that nuclear power is less scary than climate change. I think that we need electricity and we should get more of it fast in whatever way we can. And I think that these regulatory changes will make nuclear power less expensive. I also think that the tech world getting into nuclear and saying, we will come to your place and build data centers in your state if you build nuclear power plants, could be a really big deal. I think that them buying small modular nuclear reactors could be a really big deal. Like, that's going to create a first market for these things so that they can continue to hopefully, ideally, decrease the price of them. And it solves a real problem that I think if we wait for geothermal to solve it, we might have to wait too long. Nuclear is just obviously a much more mature technology than the kind of geothermal that we would need to be scalable. There's certainly mature geothermal, but it requires there to be lots of hot rocks very close to the surface, which is not the case everywhere. Whereas this new company, Fervo, which I would love, there's great videos. I don't have to make one. You can go watch a video on Fervo and how it works. Is a geothermal power plant that you could put basically anywhere. It doesn't rely on there being specific geologic features. First thorium molten salt nuclear power station. It's happening, you guys. It's really going to be a thing. This is, again, kind of shocking that this is happening. Like, I've heard about thorium reactors being maybe built for 30 years, and there's finally going to be a real one online. And you can see, yes, I am interested in purchasing fossils. Google's like, I know what kind of nerd you are. And then there's one final thing that is a reason why I think this is underexamined, but a reason why I think nuclear power might be about to get a little bit of a foothold, which is that a lot of coal-fired power plants are retiring, which means, 1, that power isn't going to be being put on the grid, but 2, all of the equipment and infrastructure is already there in a place that isn't going to be producing power anymore. So you have all of these big power lines heading into a centralized location. You have turbines that you might be able to reuse. You have a community that is reliant on there being a power station there, that's used to having a power station there. And so you can just convert an old coal-fired power plant into a nuclear power plant and use a lot of the same equipment, because it's just all of the parts where you're just boiling water are the same. All of the parts where you're just taking a lot of electricity out of one place and distributing it to a wide area, those are the same. You can reuse a lot of that same stuff. And so if we're retiring all these coal-fired power plants, we have a bunch of infrastructure ready for something else to plug into them. Now you can have that be natural gas, like it can be. You could convert it to natural gas, and we have, I think we've done that. Coal power plant convert natural gas. Please figure that out. More than 100 coal-fired power plants have been replaced or converted to natural gas since 2011. So that makes sense. But you can also do this with nuclear. And I wonder, have we ever done that? I don't think we have, but I think that we're looking at doing it. Converting coal plants to nuclear could save new construction costs. The DOE report also found nuclear plants could save up to 35% on construction costs, depending on how much of the existing site assets could be repurposed from the retired coal-fired power plants. So that is a thing. That's also a thing. Now, a lot of people are going to want to have that be natural gas because that is the most mature, clear, obvious technology to convert to. But if converting it to a nuclear plant instead will convince Google or Amazon or OpenAI to open a data center in your town and hire a bunch of people to have high-paying tech jobs, then you might do that instead. And also you have these new regulations that make that a little bit easier. Also, you have this competition from China that's maybe adding new insight into how to build safe, effective, less expensive nuclear power plants. All of these things feel to me like they are adding up toward a future where we have gone from decades of just no nuclear power to potentially it being a really important part of the power mix in the next 10 years. And I don't know if it's going to happen for sure. I'd love for geothermal to catch up so fast that it obviates the need for that. That all the people who work in the fossil fuel industry are like, no, we're going to convert over to geothermal and we're going to make that happen. And we're going to make it cheaper than nuclear, faster than nuclear can scale up. That is what I want to happen. I do. I'd rather that. I think geothermal will be a better long-term power source. But it's just not anywhere near as mature as nuclear is right now. So if I had to put money on it, I would put money on the fact that we're moving into a world with a lot more nuclear power. And that is the end of my video.